Hello. Okay. Thank you for your always enlightening speech, sir. So I have two statements to make for both of those.
Sorry, just it has to be questions, no statements.
Oh, right, okay. So you made a point about Constitution having to recognize the inherent dharma if we are pushing for it.
Right.
And it would have to fall back on the Shastras for it to understand what dharma is. And Shastras overwhelmingly, they promote monarchy. So is that something you think that Constitution would have to recognize monarchy? Or if dharma has to refactor itself and project itself on the currently existing democracy, who takes the charge of that refactor, the lawyers or the acharyas? Thank you.
So first thing is the belief that Dharma has prescribed monarchy may be dislodged by the example of the Vrishnis, who existed as a confederacy, not exactly as a monarchy. Okay? So I don't think it's a question of that. I'd rather go with a slightly different approach to it. Since 2014, ours has morphed into a presidential form of election one way or the other, where you're voting for an individual more than a party. Right? There are times that there are several people who may not vote for the party had it not been for the same figure standing at the top. And precisely because the other side has absolutely no options to offer. Right? And each of those options are malicious, diabolical, anti-dharmic, and therefore anti-Bharat. Now, therefore, I don't think fixation on on monarchy is something that has to do with it. It is possible to look at structural systems. Here is where I will find a square inch area of meeting ground with someone who I don't believe are dharmics, the Charvakas. I don't think of them as dharmics at all. They have no role. They are not to be treated as dharmics, and they cannot have a say whatsoever when it comes to the course of dharma or the treatment of dharmic institutions, much less on what needs to be treated as reform for dharmic institutions. The Charvaka does not believe in moksha, and therefore he cannot speak of an institution that puts faith in moksha. He is an existentialist. He comes as close as possible to a Hindu Marxist. He is not to be discussed. And he is not to be heard in this equation. The only thing that I'm interested in asking is, if the essence is this, in protection of the core, what structure can I come out with in the current day which propagates, advances the cause of the protection of the core? And assuming that the Constitution or the concept of a constitution, and therefore constitutionalism is here to stay, then how do I use this document to further that particular goal? And in that sense, can we look at more options where one of the requirements for appointment to an elected position or a constitutional position is the subscription to the concept of dharma as a form of the oath itself? Then I'm looking at people who will have no other option but to swear allegiance by dharma. And I again repeat, dharma is not religion. Okay? I will simply call it as the onto-politico-socio-theological experience of this land. That's how I would want to loosely define it. I am no authority, I am no expert. The second part of your question, lawyers give too much credit to themselves. No wonder the judiciary asserts independence over all other forms of organs, right? I would rather go with a situation where I seek the guidance of dharmic scholars who understand dharmic statecraft and then serve or use lawyers as bridges to get the job done from a contemporary perspective without using the word modernity or modern perspective. The need of the hour is someone like me who is interested in achieving that end has no dharmic training, and someone who has dharmic training has no way of making himself, let's say, heard or relatable to a modern statecraft audience or a contemporary statecraft audience. Therefore, where is the bridge that effectively gulfs, or let's say that builds, or gulfs this chasm, that closes this chasm and says, okay, this is how you talk to each other. The handshake is in spurts, because half the time I'm trying to look for English translatables for Sanskrit terms, which will never be complete. And in fact, the number of papers that I've seen where they try and wrap their heads around the word dharma in English itself is proof of the fact that there are multiple untranslatables to put it in the words of a person who I don't get along with, who has written a book on untranslatables, right? Now, therefore, we start with bridge scholarship in the hope that more and more lawyers will feel the need, and especially constitutional lawyers, feel the need to draw from our own sources when they speak of constitutionalism. That is something that is sorely missing today. Anybody who does that, who attempts to do that, is branded as a saffron brigand, unfortunately. So, I would want to consult the acharyas. But there is also an important aspect here that unfortunately today, certain realities of how the state operates, and you're also looking at international considerations because Bharat is not an island, either geographically or otherwise. Those realities may not be entirely relatable to someone who's practicing only the Anushtana. One of the reasons is our own religious institutions have stopped being societal institutions from the perspective of politics, because they're constantly being told, you step into politics, I'll take away your land. I'll start pressing charges against you. I'll prop someone who effectively calls the legitimacy of your position in question, who will say that this pontiff should not have been appointed in the first place, he is a usurper to the post. So the state creates all sorts of foisted litigation to shut up only our people. But when it comes to others, they don't do that. There is a fetter that's been imposed on the state which has had the effect of a chilling effect on the free speech of our acharyas. So of all the so-called people, let's say of all the people who pursue their faith systems, it's only the Hindu acharyas who are most reticent when it comes to making their voices heard on political issues or societal issues because of the treatment that the Hindu state gives to them or the Indian state gives to them. So there are people on Twitter who say, why don't our gurus speak up on this? Are you serious? Do you know how the state actually threatens them? And no state is an exception to that. They're literally held hostage to their own mathas. Only in the last few years, they've managed to speak up gradually. So one of the, let's say, condition precedents to arrive at what you're asking for is greater participation of temples and mathas openly in political discussions and social discussions, because that is not barred under the constitution. If politics has an impact on societal institutions and religious institutions, can you expect them not to have a voice in that particular process? Impossible.